how do you like it here in Zagreb for the beginning?
I love it. What I've seen, I've only been here for a day, but it's beautiful, very beautiful.
How about Nem Zagreb? Do you like it? Do you like this kind of events where you can talk with your colleagues?
I like it. I mean, it's a really beautiful setting, but also it's a really nice size. And you're not overwhelmed, and you can actually talk to people.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's just so crazy, and there's so many people that you never really get the time to connect. And this has been pretty relaxed.
Okay, we'll talk about your project, your newest project, Leonardo. So, what can you tell us about it? Can you tell us how was working on it? What can we expect from the show?
It's a very big, ambitious, 8-part drama about the life of Leonardo da Vinci. So it's a really big, exciting show. It's not easy to dramatize the life of Leonardo da Vinci because he's such a towering genius. I mean, it's kind of hard to think of anybody throughout all of human history who really equals him. And to capture his genius and kind of attempt to explain where it comes from without simplifying it, you know?
Yeah.
And so in 8 hours, we've done our best to try and focus in on some of his key works. And each episode is a different piece of art. And not always the ones you would expect either. But anyway, it's been a joy to work on. And we just started shooting last week outside Rome.
What was the most challenging part in transferring his life to the screen?
Whenever you tell a story about an artist, it's tricky because, you know, what's at stake really? He paints a painting or he doesn't. You know, it's not like telling a story about a policeman, you know, or a serial killer or a doctor who's trying to save somebody's life. The stakes are you create great art or you don't. So and I don't want to tip it yet because I want you to watch the show and find out, but we took a footnote in history. We found in one of the things we read this reference to one of his models, who was important to him, and we know that from this note, this fragment of a note that was left behind. And she also happened to be the model in his most famous missing painting. Okay. And so we've used that to create a kind of narrative frame, a fictional frame, that helps us organize the story of his life.
Great. So you learned something new about his life during this process.
You do, yes. I mean, there's some fiction mixed in there, but there's an awful lot of real history. And I think mostly what I want people to do is not just be moved and inspired by Leonardo as a man, but to learn something about why he was a genius.
You mentioned earlier The Man of High Castle. It's a very interesting story. How was working on that project? What can you say us about that experience?
Gosh,
was it challenging? It was
really challenging.
Yeah.
I had asked if I wanted to do the show, and I remembered having read that book when I was in college, and I immediately said, "Oh yes, are you kidding? I would love to." And then I made the deal, and then I went back and I read the book for the first time in 25 years, and I was like, oh my gosh, how do you turn this into a TV show? Because it's brilliant. I mean, Philip K. Dick is an absolutely brilliant writer and visionary thinker, but there was no narrative, there was no story. It was just people living in this world. And then I started building out his novel with additional characters to create drama. So I added the John Smith character that Rufus Sewell plays, the Nazi in New York, and I added Inspector Kido, the Japanese inspector in San Francisco. And I loved it. I thought it was incredibly challenging, but incredibly rewarding material, and could not have been more relevant to the world we're in right now. And one of the things that I really thought was important, and this wouldn't have happened, I don't think, if I hadn't moved away from the United States, because I was living in London at the time, is I could see my country from a distance. And what I wanted to say was, you know, we as Americans tend to look at World War II and go, well, that's not us. We never would have done that. And what I want to say is, yes, you could. You know, unfortunately, the capacity to hate, to be intolerant, is universal. Any culture can do it, you know. And I think we just assumed we were forever good. And no, every generation has to live up to the ideals of each country. And that's what I wanted to say. And that's why, like, in the first season especially, there were hardly any Nazis with German accents. They were all American Nazis. And again, I feel like that's something that's become more and more relevant to the times we're living in.
Yeah, it's the scariest thing.
It's really scary.
You worked at networks, you work at streaming services like Amazon Prime, at this example. What are the differences, and what do you think about the impact of streaming services today on the industry itself?
Both Netflix and Amazon, and now Apple and Disney Plus is coming. It's a great thing for the world, because most of my life, we Americans would make TV and send it out to the rest of the world, and they would watch American TV, but we would never buy their TV. We didn't watch other people's TV. And now, thanks to these platforms, people all over the world are hearing each other's stories and other points of view and realizing the humanity of other people that they knew nothing about before. And I think that can only be a positive. And I also think that they're going into countries and commissioning shows in native languages that would never have been made by traditional broadcasters in those countries. So it's creating opportunities for storytelling that didn't exist before.